Today, this is our first demand presentation talk. As we will also remind later, and we will speak about it in October, we are scientists Albanian will be active in the streets again, and especially in Germany for about again climate change and what can we do. We will be active particularly in Germany, and we have many demands. So we decided to make a series of speeches while we present why we have decided to choose these demands. And in particular, today is a pleasure for us to have our speakers, so Winfried Wolf. Winfried is a graduate and doctor in political science, and the wide range of his activism is really impressive. He was a member of Bundestag, is active in numerous expert groups, and is also editor-in-chief of Luna Park 21, which is a magazine for the critique of the global economy. He advocates for true electric mobility, and so like railroads instead of expensive electric cars, which rely on extractivism. And so it's a pleasure for us to have him speaking about how impactful can be a change on the transport system, in particular referring to German mobility. I will now share the screen with the slides. And Winfried, the stage is yours.
Okay, I shall start.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation for the Scientist Rebellion. I'm very happy to speak here, and I'm living in Potsdam together with my daughter, which is 17-year-old, and she made the PowerPoint presentation or helped me to do so. Okay. So first, a subject about what we want to speak. The subject is the first slide, and it's the headline, the transport sector and the climate crisis, and what has to be done and what has to be changed. That means I really speak about the worldwide transport sector, of course, with a main expression towards the German transport sector, but nevertheless, it's about the world, the climate, and the impact of the transport sector concerning the car industry, the oil industry, etc. So let's go to the next slide, the first one officially. I think only to make it very short, but we have to see that we are confronted with a triple crisis. A crisis of the dominated by the war in the Ukraine, a crisis concerning the economy and the social crisis, and a crisis concerning the climate. And maybe it's the deepest crisis since World War II, and maybe even it's the deepest crisis ever existing, because the question is the existence of the human race, existing of the mankind and womankind. And this is true concerning the war, which can be converted in a nuclear war. It's true concerning the economy, which will end in this winter, in a bitter winter, with a social crisis, and the next year with an economic crisis. And this is true concerning the climate. I only want to remind you the last summer, with one of the hottest summer in the history, summer with no water in the Rhine, summer with big heatings and destruction of huge woods in Portugal and Spain, in France, in Germany too. So next page. I think we have to debate concerning all our actions about what are the crucial aspects in this situation. What are the crucial aspects which we can maybe combine this triple crisis with the foreseeable social protests against the consequences of the war, so the energy crisis and the social crisis concerning inflation, unemployment, poverty, etc., etc. And I want to try this with the next slide. And I say we have in the worldwide industry, the oil car industrial complex is the most decisive complex of the world industry as a whole. And this is true since more than 100 years. I'm studying since about 3 decades about this oil car industrial complex. And more or less, you can see that today, among the global 500, which are the most important and the most biggest 500 companies in the world, including banks, including assurance, including industrial, including the sales in the big shopping centers. The most important complex is the oil car industrial complex. This complex has a share of about 25% of this addition of the global 500. And this is true for the sales, in German Umsatz, and this is true for the profits. That means about 1/3 of the addition of all profits of the global 500s, about 1/4 of the addition of the all companies is 1/3 concentrated by this oil car industry, which are not more than about 25 companies. This is the big oil companies, about 7 or 10 companies. These are the car industry companies in United States, in Japan, in Germany, in China, in France, and in Italy. And these are two builders of planes, which is Boeing in United States, and which is Airbus in Europe, that means in France and in Germany. Next slide, please. The climate impact of this transport sector is about the same figure, about 25% of all greenhouse gases. This is the same figure just by chance. It's not a question of the mathematics, but just by chance. You can say that about 15% of all street traffic emissions, emissions account for about 15% of all emissions of climate gases, 5% for the air transport, and 5% for shipping, which especially is the shipping of container ships. Next slide, please. Now, in the international debate, we are confronted with a big lie of the car industry and the lobby of the car industry, saying that we have a new idea. And the idea is, yes, we agree that it was a problem with the oil, a problem with peak oil, etc., etc. And now we have the solution. The solution is e-mobility. That means we only change in the cars the Antrieb, the machines, and we will have batteries instead of diesel and gasoline cars. My answer is this is wrong. The e-mobility will not be a solution for 3 reasons. The first one is the battery production for this cars is extremely CO2 intensive. In general, you can see the Tesla S-Class, you have to drive about 70,000 kilometers until you are in a situation that you can start with the profits of having less CO2 in the consumption. The huge impact of the battery means that in a Renault Zoe electric car, you need 40,000 kilometers. In a Tesla S, you need 70,000 kilometers until this huge impact of the battery is integrated. Secondly, the replacement. We have now about 1.2 billion cars in the world. That means personal cars, and another about 300,000 lorries or trucks. Altogether 1.5 billion trucks, buses, and personal cars. Every year, about 100,000 cars more are netto in the streets. This replacement of the drive system from fossil drive to battery drive will take about 15 years. But in this process of the next 15 years, the whole fleet of the 1.5 billion cars and trucks will be about 1.8 or even 2 billion cars and trucks, and there will be about maybe 30% at the end of the year 2035 electric cars. That means the addition of new cars will be so high that the reduction of emissions concerning one car, which is about 40 or 50%, concerning with a fossil fuel car, will be overwhelmed. It will be more emissions in the addition concerning the replacement in one car. It's a little bit difficult to explain for me in English, I'm sorry. And the third reason why this e-mobility is no perspective means that the dependence on oil, which we have today for about 95% in the car oil complex, is only exchanged by the dependence on natural resources that are also very short in supply and whose extraction can only be carried out at great cost to the climate and the environment. That means concerning rare earths, concerning lithium, concerning cobalt, concerning copper. The last point, you need 3 times more copper in an electric car than in a normal fossil car. Next slide, please. When we speak about actions and activities in Germany and about activities concerning the car sector in Germany, the car industry in Germany, we have to see that the car industry in Germany is unique. The German automotive industry has 2 groups, which is Volkswagen with 12 other companies, 12 other Marke, 12 other companies, daughters, which is Audi, Skoda, Seat, Porsche, MAN, Lamborghini, Bugatti, Ducati, and other more. That means Volkswagen is the first one. The second one is Daimler Mercedes with the daughter of Smart. And the third one is BMW, including the cars of Mini in Great Britain produced and Rolls-Royce. This German car industry has a unique position worldwide. It is #1 in Europe, #1 in China, and #1 concerning the worldwide production. That means even in China, the German companies have about 45% of all new produced cars. These cars are not exported from Germany to China, but Volkswagen, Daimler, and BMW are producing in China with such a big share of the whole Chinese car production. Okay, that's correct. The new slide. No, go back to number 6. Okay. No, okay, sorry, number 7, sorry. In Germany, we have the word Tempofreiheit. That means we have a lack of speed on a big part of the German highways. It's about 1/3 of the highway system, which has 12,000 kilometers. 1/3 of them have absolutely no speed limit. That means even you can go with 350 kilometers per hour or even miles per hour. It's no limit. You can do it and it's no problem. That is absolutely unique in all over the world. Only Afghanistan, North Korea, and I guess Saudi Arabia has the same situation, but they are not so important concerning the transport. But in the civilized or industrialized countries like Italy, France, Switzerland, Eastern Europe, Russia, China, the United States, Canada, whole South America, whole Africa, we have speed limits, but in Germany, there is no speed limit existing. And it's more or less understood in Germany as a Kulturgut, but we have a majority in the population which is against having no speed limit. We have a majority since 1973 in East and West Germany. In East Germany, all the time there was a maximum speed of 100 till 1990, when there was the unification. And in the unified Germany, you have a majority of about 58 or 60% of the people saying, yes, we want to have a speed limit. But the parties, all parties in the German parliament, maybe except the left party, but even the Greens, which have been in the government in 1998 till 2005 under the Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, and which are now in the government since last October. Even in this government, it's no debate about having any kind of a speed limit. It's a mystery. It's and the reason for that is the big impression of the car lobby in all the parties to prevent a decision to have this speed limit. Next slide, please. It's very interesting that in the climate movement, nobody is speaking about the trains. Oh, everybody is speaking about trains, saying trains are an alternative to street traffic. I don't agree. In general, of course, I have no car. I am driving all my meetings by train to the meetings, but nevertheless, I can argue and I can prove that a high-speed train with a speed of about 280 or 330, like the trains of TGV in France, like the Italo in Italian, or like the Frecce in Italy, or like the ICE in Germany, or like the Ave trains in Spain, the impact on the climate concerning 1 personal kilometer is the same as the impact on the climate when you drive in a normal middle-class fossil car with 2 persons in this car. And the reason is not only the high speed, of course, the emissions, the level of emissions is going up with the speed in excessive, I don't know what's exponential way. That means from 100 kilometers to 200 kilometers is about 3 or 4 times more. But also it's very important to see that the new lines which are built for high-speed trains are lines with the long radius, yes, you understand, and are built with many tunnels and many concrete elements. So if you combine this all together, you have this catastrophic balance sheet. Therefore, I say, even we should think about a speed limit not only on the street transport, but only for the trains. And this speed limit for the trains is not only a question of the climate, but also a question which is very important for the people. So you can see in all the countries like China, like France, like Italy, like Germany, that the more high-speed trains you have, the less integration of the regions you have. That means in Italy, for instance, when the Italo and the Frecce trains were established, they reduced the frequency of the intercity trains. In Germany, when we got the ICE trains, the Interregio Express, which was a very clever train system until 2001, blue trains, which are very integrated in the regions, are closed, and all the money was get to the high-speed trains. The same is true in China, and the same was true in France, where about 5,000 kilometers of regional trains are destroyed when they began to develop the TGV trains. Yes, and I'm sorry, months back, and we have to see that concerning this high-speed trains, the European Union with this TEN, Trans-European Networks, and all the countries, Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, no, Portugal not, Germany, even Austria, have huge new project for high-speed trains with huge tunnels. For instance, in Austria, they are building now the Brenner base tunnel, they are building the Semmering tunnel, and they are building the Koralm tunnel. Altogether, will have a cost of about 50 billions of euro. With this money, you could double the lines in all over Austria, but they will build the next 20 years all these tunnels. The same is true for Germany, where you have the project of Stuttgart 21, where under the city of Stuttgart, with about 600,000 of people, 100 kilometers of new tunnels are built. If you want to compare it, in all over Germany, we have only about 600 kilometers of tunnels in the rail system. Under Stuttgart, in the last 10 years and the next 10 years, are built 100 kilometers of tunnel system only to link one single main station and to put all the rails under the level under the earth. The same is true for Italy. The big fight in the Val di Susa against the tunnel between Turin and Lyon is very important for this subject. The same is true for France. The same is true for Spain, where they have big projects like that. So let's go to the next slide. I want not speak much about the air traffic, but of course it's part of the subjects. Anybody maybe is informed that the under the motorized forms of transport, the air traffic contributes most to climate warming. It is much more than in the street traffic, and of course much more than in railway rail traffic. Next slide, please. So I come to our demands. Altogether, I have 10 demands which we can bring forward. And if you say you want only to hear 3 ones, so we can think about which are the 3 most important demands of the 10 demands I present now. The first means stop of any further road construction. Stop, go back. Stop of any further expansion and new construction of airports. And instead, we have to dismantle parts of these structures in favor for walking, for cycling, for trains, for tramways or streetcars, and for buses. Second, we are pledging for a policy of avoiding any kind of avoiding so much as possible of motorized traffic. For example, town without cars, or town or city with massively reduced cars means that in this city it's very nice to live, and you have not go outside the city for any kind of trips. I don't know. Bertolt Brecht said the poem, I don't know if you can translate in English, die Schwärmerei für die Natur kommt von der Unbewohnbarkeit der Städte. That means when people say the nature of the forests are so beautiful, this is one result of the destruction of the cities, because people cannot live and cannot have good living standard in the cities, and that is one reason to go outside the cities. It's an important and interesting comparison between Munich and Cologne. In Munich, we have in the center of the city the so-called Englischer Garten or English garden. which is very huge with some small water, with many green places, with many restaurants, etc., etc. In Cologne, which is a city with also 1 million people, we have none of this. And if you have an analysis of the mobility of people in Munich and the people of Cologne, you can see that in Cologne you have 10 times more trips outside the town for people only for leisure time than in Munich, because in Munich you can go in this English garden, and in Cologne you have no place like that. Yeah, next slide. Often it's forgotten that a very important mode of mobility is the non-motorized mode of walking and of cycling. And for decades of years, it was normal that the transport science did not even count the share of the walking and of the cycling in the cities. Between the end of the Second World War until the 80s, it was no debate. Now we have cities like Amsterdam, like Den Haag, like Copenhagen, where about 50 or 60% of all trips that people make in a year are by walking or by cycling. And therefore, we have to demand a massive promotion of the non-motorized mode of transport, walking and cycling, and an expansion of the sidewalks, of the cycling paths, and a creation of car-free zones. Fourth demand. We are calling in Germany for speed limits of 30, 80, 120, which means 30 kilometers in all cities, in all residential areas, 80 on all trunk roads below the level of highways, and 120 or maybe 100, I don't know, on the motorways. Fifth demand, we are demanding for an expansion of the public transport in the cities. That means with bus and tramways or streetcars, and for an expansion of a railroad system that puts time before speed. In German, it's a slogan, Takt before tempo. That means an interlink of the train systems, which is done in Switzerland, with the Taktverkehr, which is much more important as a speed, because the people don't count, especially the time you are in a train from A to B, but they count the time you are in the system of the railway system. And if you have very good linked rails, you can substitute the lower level of the speed by the shortening time to change trains. That is combined with the demand of no new high-speed lines and for a speed limit for rails, which could be in Germany about 200 or 220, maybe in other countries like Austria 150, Switzerland is about 150. Next slide. Demand number 6. A green railroad means that it must be 100% electric. In Germany, we have 60% electric. In Switzerland, we have 100% electric. And in Austria, last October, the government decided that until the next 5 or 6 years, they also want to have 100% electric trains and no left diesel trains. This is all the time forgotten. In Germany, there's no plan like that. And in the other countries like France, Italy, and Spain and Portugal also. But if you want to have a green railway, if you want to have the chance of a system with a very low level of emission, you have to call for this 100% electric railroad. Okay, demand number 7 is stop for destructive large-scale projects like Stuttgart 21, or like the Fehmarn Belt between Germany and Denmark, or like the destruction of the station of Hamburg-Altona, which is planned for the next 5 years. And the 8th demand, which is on the same slate, means that we have about, in Germany, 100 small measures to rehabilitate and optimize the existing railways. For instance, in Germany, we have many parts of the most important railway, which is only one single road, one single rail, which have to have a double railway. We have often a long line of electrified railway and a very small 20 kilometers which have no electric line, and therefore if you only do this electrification of this 20 or 25 kilometers, we have a big impact, and which is not so expensive. 9th and demand, next slide. We are demanding for a new or a re-establishment of an European-wide night train network. That means you can imagine today that a night train network, which is European-wide, means that in Berlin, you can enter a night train in the afternoon one day, and in the next evening or late evening, you will be on the Rossio place in Lisboa. That means this is possible today, and even much of it was possible 20 years ago. For instance, when I was a member of the German Bundestag in Baden-Württemberg, which is in the southwest of Germany, it was for me no problem to have anywhere in this very, very huge country a meeting, maybe at Karlsruhe, maybe at Ravensburg, maybe at Kreisheim in the east, or maybe at Stuttgart. Important was only that I'm at 11:30 or 11:35 in Karlsruhe or in Mannheim, and I go in a night train, and the next morning at 6:30 a.m. I was in Berlin, and 1 hour later I was in the German Bundestag. These lines have been destroyed by the railway company in Germany. The Austrian night rail system could substitute a bit of this destruction of the German night trains, but the France and Italy and Switzerland and even Spain, they destroyed the night trains too, which is very profitable for the hotels, because dozens of millions of people don't go in a hotel, do now go in a hotel because there are no night trains, and they won't go in a hotel. They won't go in a hotel when there would have been night trains. And one slogan in the German night trade was Die Nacht schlafen, den Tag gewinnen. That means you go in the evening in a night train, and next morning, I did it many times with my family. I went in the train in the 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in Berlin, Wannsee, even by car. And in the next morning at 8 o'clock, I was in Avignon, and 1 hour later, I was at the Middle Sea. That is possible, but it was destructive. And if we do a establishment of this Europe-wide night train network, we can substitute half of the European flights and shifting them to the rail. 10th and last demand. We are calling for mobility nationwide for €1 per day. That means 365 euro tickets nationwide for all urban publics nationwide, and for all regional trains, and for all scheduled buses, Linienbusse in German. That means this is a demand which first was established in Austria for Vienna, which is now in addition in many other Austrian times, and which is concerning the cities and the city transport, the public transport, combined with the regional trains and the scheduled buses. This can be supplemented by a so-called climate ticket, Klima ticket, so it's called in Austria, which in Austria says for €3 per day, or about 1,095 euro in the year, we have all public traffic free in all towns, on all buses, on all tramways, on all trains, regional trains, and on all long distance trains, and even on many of the seas in Austria and Switzerland, very important. This could be combined with social demands concerning poor people, etc. But this combination of €365 ticket nationwide for all urban public transport and the regional trains, combined with the climate tickets for the long distance trains, for me, seems to be a good answer concerning the debate about the €9 tickets. So, next slide. There are three heavy arguments. In German we say Totschlagargumente. Three heavy arguments against this proposals I do. The first one means it's too expensive. The second one means the jobs are distracted in the motor industry. And the last argument is there are no majorities for doing this. Concerning the money, it's no problem for the money. We don't need new taxes. We don't need new money. This program of a climate-friendly traffic turnaround can be financed by its entirety by eliminating all subsidies for the automobile traffic and the aviation, including the subsidies for company car, including the subsidies for the diesel fuel, and including the lack of kerosene taxation. This counts about €3 billion per year. This could be added by stopping any new construction of streets and roads, which is about 10 billion per year. And it could be added by stopping all destructive large-scale projects like Stuttgart 21, Frankfurt long-distance tunnel, the project of Fehmarn, the project of Altona, etc., and by reducing all the high external costs of the air traffic and of the street traffic, which is about 20 billion per year, which there could be a reduction. Second, the next slide, the jobs. In Germany, we have about 800,000 jobs in the car industry. This is a big debate that these jobs are in danger. In reality, they are not in danger by our engagement. They are in danger by e-mobility, because e-mobility will mean that the jobs in the car industry will be reduced by 40 to 50%, because it's much easier to build a battery car than to build a fossil fuel car. But we add to this problem that by expanding the public transport and by building a railway system, which is really nationwide or Europe-wide, etc., and by expanding the public transport in the cities and by building up a night train system in Europe, we can create about 1.5 million new jobs in the whole society. And this is in addition that a big part of the products like locomotives, like wagons, like buses, which are needed for this new alternative transport sector, can be built by the same car industry. And the last slide, the second last slide, and the third argument against my proposals means I'm sure that we can get majorities for all our alternative. The €9 ticket
already showed that there was a mass demand for more public transport. And this was a jump in cold water because there was zero preparation and absolutely insufficient capacity. A well thought out and a well prepared and a professionally communicated policy for such a climate-friendly transport turnaround will find a clear majority. And I go back to my starting in my intervention in the last summer with the record heat, with the forest fires, and with the water emergency. We could see in what danger the mankind is living, and the people which we are addressing knew that this danger is real. Of course, we cannot say, we cannot fight against cars in general, but we have to present such an alternative and to argue why this alternative is human, is social, is financeable, and is necessary. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Winfried. Thank you very much. Yeah, let me switch on back my camera so we all see each other. Thank you very much, Winfried. It was a very, very interesting talk. And just to give also some perspective from SR, it's amazing for me how many demands are make sense in the transport sector. How many things are there to do. Also in SR, we are discussing as concrete proposals for October some of the things you mentioned. The speed limit, for example, which is incredible that we don't have in Germany, or the to end all subsidies to the car industry that are a lot of money that could be and should be reinvested in sustainability. And also this thing of the ticket, a ticket that is affordable for all. Some of the audience, some people in the audience are not from Germany. So just to give 1 sentence of context, this year we tried in Germany this €9 ticket during the summer, a monthly ticket for urban transport and regional railroads. And it was only €9 per month. And it was, as Winfried said, it was a mess. Lots of people going on these trains, very poorly organized, but there is a huge demand. When you mentioned, Winfried, about these, the need that we have of jobs in the industry of, in all the companies and in the public transport, I thought that, yeah, it's true that the no speed limit is now just a cultural element of Germany. But another cultural element of Germany, and living in Germany since a couple of years, even I learned so, is that Deutsche Bahn is very, very inefficient. We need many more jobs in the public transport sector to actually face the crisis. And so I think that that was a very, very good point. And I'm sure we will keep on discussing these very interesting demands. I will now start to the question Q&A section. So if we have questions from the audience, Julie and I will moderate. You can also write in the chat. If you are comfortable, you can raise your hand and make direct questions, but you can also write in the chat and we will read it aloud.
Do I have to control the chat?
No. It will be me and Julia.
Okay.
Control the chat. We have a question already from Troy that is, what are the odds that batteries will become environmentally sound? Is there any chance that and then we can go into a sustainable electric car sector? Maybe we can start with that while we gather all other questions.
I shall answer quite now. Of course, the yes, batteries, there will be an improvement of the batteries, and in the last 20 years, there have been some improvements. Nevertheless, this batteries will be, until the end, very CO2 intensive. There is no big chance there will be a solution. Of course, we have to go back and to think when about 20 or 25 years ago, progressive people called for electric cars, they thought about very small cars for small distances, etc. And in that time, for instance, 1970, even the Volkswagen Käfer, the Beetle, had about 700 kilogram weight. Today, a normal Volkswagen Golf has about 1.5 tons, and a normal Tesla S has about 2 tons or 2,000 kilogram. And the new electric cars like the Taycan of Porsche, or like the e-tron of Audi, and like I don't know, they have about 2 tons. That means even the weight of these cars is very, very high. And this weight has to be moved by these batteries. But anyway, in 1890 until 1910, it was not clear if the cars, if the motor cars will be driven by electric or by fuels. And even Henry Ford thought about electric cars, but he had the same problem. He said, this cars, the battery is very, very heavy. It was the same as today. And he said, the problem with the battery is that it's a very small distance you can go with this battery. Today, even the most expensive cars like a Tesla S, which has a price of about $120,000, it has only a range of about 550 kilometers per tank, per volume. And after this, you have to go to a Tesla station, and it needs at least 20 minutes to have, again, 80% of the capacity back in the car. And this is the situation in the summer. In the winter, even if you have maybe 10 or 20 degrees minus, the problem is much, much higher. Therefore, the electric car producers say, please be careful with the climate machine, be careful with stereo and radio, etc., when you go in the winter, because the range of your car will be very, very shortened. In a moment, we have only about, even in Germany, we have only about 5% of all of the fleet of 48 million of cars are electric cars. In this situation, it's not such a big problem to find a place of an electric station. But if you have 60 or 80% of the cars which are electric cars, and even if these cars are starting to go in the holidays, maybe 8 million are starting to go in the holidays, and after 5 years, 5 hours, they have no electricity in the cars. It's not understandable how this could be organized. Or maybe you can say one group has to start in 1 hour PM in the night, the next one at 3 hours. It's absolutely crazy system. This can only function that this electric cars are cars for very small groups of very rich people, and the cars normally are the second car or the third car in the household. In Norwegian, where we have the highest level of electric cars, 80 or 70% of all electric cars are second cars. Will you say second cars? Zweitauto. Also in a household, you have a normal car with fuel, and you have a second car for shopping or for city trips, because they know you can only go about 200 kilometers with this car. We don't go in the fjords in Norway with such an electric car. Okay.
Thank you very much, Winfried, for your answer. Julia, who's next in line for the questions?
So I believe Harold had his hand up before Valeria's question in the chat. So Harold, if you would like to unmute and ask your question, go ahead.
Yeah, hello, thank you. I hope my WLAN connection will be stable. Winfried, thank you very much for your positions and your explanations of the subject to our community. I am active in a German NGO called WCD, Verkehrsclub Deutschland. I'm active in a sustainable traffic for the future. WCD is existing since 1986. So far to me. Now, Winfried, I have a question on a special system of numbers I use to explain my position that the individual car is not sustainable for the future. Means that we can't overcome with an individual car. My system of numbers is the following. The Umweltbundesamt, it's the German authority for sustainability, points out that the carbon dioxide per person and year might be in the maximum of 1 ton CO2 per year. Now in Germany we have 10 tons. That's the first number, 1 ton. And the second number is the amount of CO2 by production of cars. I have the numbers of Mike Berners-Lee, which has put out a book called How Bad Are Bananas? And there he calls all the numbers of oil products you can get. And in this book, he points out the numbers between 4 tons CO2 and to 25 tons CO2 for an SUV car, only for the production. If you now put together the 1 ton per person and year and the 4 to 25 tons only for the production of a car, then you will see that doesn't fit together. And based on these numbers, my position is to stop all individual car traffic, means to lower down maybe by 90% or more from the today's number of cars. In Germany, maybe 45 million cars. In future, cars only for people who need the cars for their profession, not for others. Others should go by buses, by trains, by foot, by bikes. And therefore, I think in Germany, we have to improve our rail system by maybe 50 or maybe 100% for getting a better service in the plain country, in the little villages and small towns. Winfried, do you know the numbers I mentioned, and what do you think about them?
Yes, I know these numbers, and in general, nobody on the side of the progressive movements can be against your proposals. So the only problem is it's not very realistic. In the situation today, we have every year 500,000 cars more every year. Even in the last year of the pandemic, we have 600,000 cars more at the end of the year. Even in this year with the €9 ticket, we have about 400,000 or 500,000 cars more. If we go now on the streets, are saying we need a reduction of the car traffic as soon as possible of 90%. I think it's yes, you can say it and you can write it, But to go on the streets with this demand is a little bit useless. It's a little bit unrealistic. Anyway, I have no car since 1986, and I am supporting totally your position. I know all the position of the Uber, of the Bundesbank, etc. And it's correct that there's a chance that about 90% of the cars can be reduced. For instance, in Copenhagen, we have today a situation, as I told already, that about 55% of the movements of the trips in a year are made by bikes, about another 10 or 15% are made by walking, about 10% are made by public transport. That means it's left about 15% for car traffic. But this is the result of about 3 decades of a new transport system. Or I can give an example. If you compare the two towns, Münster and Osnabrück, these are two German towns with every town has about 250,000 people. They are only about 150 kilometers distance. They have the same days of rain and the same days of sunny days in the year. Münster, you have a situation which is not the same as Copenhagen, but you have a situation of about 40% by going by bike, 15% going by walking, 10–15% going by buses, and only about 25% or 30% is car traffic. In Osnabrück, you have quite contrary. You have 60% car traffic, only 15% biking, etc., etc. The reason for that is not that the people in Münster are genetically organized bikers, and the people in Osnabrück are not by nature car crazy. But the problem is that in Münster you have an old tradition of the proposing and of the supporting of bikes, and in Osnabrück we have it not. Maybe the main reason is that in Osnabrück we have Volkswagen with a big factory, and in Münster you have only Dr. Oetker, which is doing, I don't know, for cooking things, which is not so important for transport. That means you need a long fight for doing this. And therefore, I agree totally with your proposal, but we have to find ways to get so near to your proposal as it's possible.
Thank you very much, Winfried, for your clear answer. Yeah, of course, the ambitious goals are always what we aim for, but we want to build step by step by feasible wins. And that's why we are researching into these nice and feasible proposals. We have some questions in the audience. Valeria asked about, what do you think about electric bikes? Can they be a part of the solution? We have also a question about from Alice asking, what do you expect the people in Germany and politicians to react to this, which is, I think, is interesting, because there are many points that you mentioned that are now quite felt by the German public. For example, the tickets. And also Nate has his hands up, so maybe you want to ask your question, Nate, and then we see whether we have still time for other questions and answers. But I will first gather these three. So electric bikes, the reaction by the public, and then Nate, can you ask your question?
Reaction of the public concerning what?
Concerning our demands. So what would you expect the public to say about the demands that you mentioned? And Nate?
Yes, electric bikes. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, just quickly, it was just a comment that I think Cesar also mentioned, is about mineral resource availability. I mean, I've seen a talk recently was saying some minerals we would have a shortage of up to 90% for first generation of renewables and electric vehicles, etc. And other minerals might be even over 95%. Is there any studies done particularly about the relationship between what we would want or ideally need and also the resource availability? Thank you.
I didn't understand, I'm sorry. Can you repeat, Daniele?
Nate, could you repeat your question?
Yeah, sorry. So the question is, are there any studies about the availability of mineral resources and the demands of creating, you know, a sustainable transport system, what that would look like? Because clearly, from what I've seen, there's a huge shortage in mineral resources to be able to create the renewable, first generation even of the renewable systems that are being proposed by a lot of companies, you know, to do a full substitution, which we know that's not possible. But I want to know if you have any information particularly about this subject. Thank you.
Okay, so the question of Winfried was about how do we find the minerals? And there was also a question in the chat about, electric cars are also a problem for extractivism. We cannot exploit the global south. But Nate was also pointing, okay, but where do we find the mineral resources for this change? Because there is a shortage on many, many aspects.
Yes, concerning the mineral resources, it depends what mineral resources are necessary. I repeat, among this 1.2 billions of cars, today less than 1% are electric cars. And in the production, in the year production, less than 3% are electric cars. Therefore, in the situation now, it's no mass problem. It's a problem. It begins to be a problem because some minerals and some mineral resources are concentrated on very little countries, but it's not such a mass problem as the production of normal cars. Concerning lithium, for instance, which is absolutely necessary for batteries, the people say, or the lobby of electric cars, like Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, is saying it's no problem, we have enough lithium, which is not really wrong. There is many lithium in the earth all over the world. The problem is how to extract it in the earth, and it's concentrated in some parts of China, and in some parts of South America, like Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, and Chile. And this is normally extracted in countries which are in regions with a very, very shortage of water. And this is a real problem, that you need millions of liters to produce this lithium for one cars. And in this desert of Chile, for instance, where there's nearly no water existing, they have to make a real big holes in the earth to get this water up. And afterwards, this earth will be destroyed for hundreds of years. And the thousands or tens of thousands of people which up until now could live in this region have to go to Montevideo or to Santiago de Chile, etc., etc. Concerning copper, the problem is much greater. As I told already, up until now, the electric car needs about 3 times more copper than a normal car with diesel or with fuel gasoline machine. And up until now, it's no real problem. Copper is enough, but if from this 1.2 billion of cars worldwide, only half, only 600,000 cars, 600 million, sorry. If 600 million of cars will be electric cars and they need 3 times more copper, this will be a mass problem to find this copper. And maybe you remember 5 years ago, there was in Brasilia huge sea to hold back the how do you say, the sediments of the copper production. was ruined and about 250 people died. That means the way of the production, the way of the extraction in the earth is normally very, very problematic for the people. Therefore, even in Portugal or even in Germany, people say, yes, we can find maybe cobalt or maybe seltene Erden, earth, I don't know in English, or even lithium. But if you debate, in Portugal, for instance, if you debate that you need a huge region where this lithium has to be extracted, you will have a mass movement in Portugal against this extraction. And people say, please do it in Africa, or do it in South America, or do it in China, but not in Portugal, which is a civilized country. We can use the electric cars, but we cannot have an extraction of lithium in Portugal. And therefore, I would say the problems will start in the next 10 years with the electric cars. Up until now, many studies say it's no big problem. You have to add one problem. The problem is up until 2 decades before, the majority of the institutes which are more or less progressive, in Germany it's the Öko-Institute, the Eco-Institutes, said electric cars are no perspective. Today, it's a total change in the position. 90% of these institutes, of the Eco-Institutes, say, yes, electric cars are a perspective. And the reason is not that there was any change in the extraction and the problems of the electricity. The problem is that these Eco-Institutes are paid by the governments for doing such kind of analysis. That's the problem. For instance, Brot für die Welt.
I apologize. We unfortunately we have to cut short because we have part of the speaker coming. But really, thank you very much for the interesting question and answer session and for the very nice talk. Now I hand over to Julia, who will introduce the next part of today's meeting. And again, before if people need to go, but before I want to thank again Winfried for accepting our invitation and for the nice talk and discussion that we have. Thank you very much, Winfried.
Yes, thank you. It seems very clear that there are a number of demands which are feasible. And so, as we've said in the chat, Scientist Rebellion and the coalition partners, Debt for Climate and Letzte Generation, which is last generation in Germany, are discussing the exact key demands that will be part of our October actions. So moving on, I'd like to introduce Mark Lapperton, who is our excellent narrative specialist, and he will be introducing the actions under which the Scientist Rebellion Coalition will be undertaking in Germany. So a narrative overview of our reasoning and our plans for this October. So Mark, if you'd like to share your screen and put your slides up, which we anticipate are absolutely beautiful, and will clarify some of the questions as well from the chat, where people were asking about things which relate to transport, and also how we might present the narrative to the public.
Thank you, Julia. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, I'd like to start by actually referring back to Winfried's last answer, when he was explaining why trusted institutions are developing narratives around mobility, in this instance, electric mobility, who's paying them, and why are they putting these stories out when the underlying mechanisms and extraction processes are no different. I'm about to sort of present to you that that's a micro example of a meta problem we have with how we talk about climate change, and in particular, the role of responsibility of scientists within that, because it's informing our narrative and it's informing how we bring more oxygen to what Winfried's been talking to you tonight. It's how we bring more citizens in to the story than we have at the moment across wealthy countries or the global north. Why is it that the dangers get more obvious by the week, but the gap between scientific findings and action is arguably getting bigger and bigger. So I'm going to go through this quite quickly because we've only got about sort of 10, 15 minutes. It's designed to be a bit longer, but you'll get the hang of it. Okay, so I'm going to skip really quickly. This you know, absolutely. And unfortunately, you all know this too. Okay, now this is all about nodding along. So we're well aware of the promises. And increasingly, and I think this again is echoed in Winfried's discussion, the hypothetical. This isn't a secret. This is John Kerry. You all know who he is, and he's openly admitting that we don't have half of what we need. So that's kind of where we are. That was last year he made that comment. And again, another expert, this time advising the British government, being very honest, if the technology is working today, if it's not working today, you can take it off the table for 2050. So again, this is all public domain, right? So nothing's working fast enough. So far, no news for everyone on this call. And you know this too. In many countries in Europe, because of what's happening in Ukraine and after the pandemic, we're now drilling again or trying to get licenses in places like the North Sea. Colleagues in Netherlands are campaigning against it. We have a field also in the North Sea here in England or Scotland, where Shell wants to extract. But this is really what it's all about in terms of trying to engage. If we can engage, we can bring pressure, we can start to win demands. It's just, unfortunately, a very simple and convenient truth. People in wealthy countries are not acting in numbers. We're not collectively organized. We don't have sufficient levels of agency. We have awareness. If someone from a polling company calls you, you will tell them you're very concerned. But in terms of how you lead your life politically, we don't have much progress to show for it. Very different story across the majority world. Yeah, people are dying, and it's 1.5 across the global south already, a danger zone already for most people on the planet. So what do you do? It's a question I'm sure many of you ask yourselves, and to your credit, you've come to this call, you've listened to Winfried tonight, so in so many ways you're not the audience, because you've kind of got it. Our problem is that there's not enough of you, not nearly enough of you, and the rest of the talk is going to suggest how we might do something quite urgent about that. So a few observations. Science is more trusted now than it was before the pandemic. There's various polling going around the world. This is just one example. Now, this is a way into the story. We need to invite scientists to really honor the trust the public has in them. And we want to do this by asking scientists and other trusted figures, but particularly scientists, to share publicly what they share with one another about the world's response to climate change. And this is what they share. And again, it's not going to be news to anyone on this call. If you're in and around the climate bubble, you will know this isn't possible. In fact, you've probably known this for years, and many scientists even had the courage to say so in 2015. So it's not news to you, but there's a but. I'll skip that, you know this. And this is why it's important. This is why it's really, really important. It's not scientific. Many scientists will tell you we shouldn't even use global temperature goals. It's not accurate, it's misleading, okay? But this is what was decided by the world in 2015. This is the global story about climate change, if a citizen looks up for more than 30 seconds. And here's Johan Rockström kind of nodding to that. And he's called it a planetary boundary, and we've lost it, okay? So quoting one of the most well-known scientists in the world, to the climate bubble, we're going to cross a planetary boundary. And suddenly this story about climate change is not about the future anymore, not only about the future, which it always has been. It's also about the past. And this is crucial because emotionally, we can change the frequency of the story and we can start to engage citizens in a way that we've never been able to do. I mean, I don't welcome the fact that 1.5 is lost as outlined by the IPCC, but it's a massive opportunity to engage. But it's an opportunity that can be easily lost. And I'll explain why. No one's really saying so. you'll have all these, if you're from England, you'll see David Attenborough, but well-known NGOs, scientific institutes, Secretary General of the Works. They're keeping 1.5 alive, but it's starting to change. The cracks are appearing. You get a few scientists saying, oh, well, we're not going to meet it, but hey, we really never were. It was always ambitious. And besides, every fraction of a degree matters. So there is now a visible attempt to start to massage the goal away, even though one of the most famous scientists in the world in climate is saying, actually, that's a planetary boundary. So it's going to go one of two ways. And just a quick bit of evidence, the climate scientist community knows this. This is just a room full of 60 academics. UEA is the University of East Anglia. It's home to the Tyndall Centre. It's a very famous climate institute, and a straw poll in the room. No one put their hand up. No one thought 1.5 was still alive. Perhaps the most famous piece of evidence, this was conducted by Nature magazine before COP26 last year. You're looking at 90% of living IPCC lead authors believing, we're heading to overshoot. Only 4% thought 1.5 was likely. And incidentally, 40% of those that were approached responded. This is crazy high for a survey. And you have a massive consensus. So this is not like 10% of IPCC scientists who responded said, this is almost half. And there are some brave souls. James Dyke is a UK climate scientist. Unfortunately, he's still rather alone. This was from May this year when he came out publicly in quite stark terms and said, if you think 1.5 is possible, you're misinformed, in denial, or you're dishonest. And he was ignored. It was ignored by the scientific community. Whereas other voices are much louder. You'll be very familiar. Professor Michael Mann, who's a hero, Mr. Hockey Stick, right? Absolute hero in science. As a communicator, not the case. This is, for me, this is not the way you go about it. This is keeping citizens from engaging by just pointing the finger at the political system and telling it to get on with it. If you say something is technically possible, the public hear the word possible. It's not possible, because the type of socio-economic changes that would be needed to meet what the IPCC is laying out are without human precedent. They need to be global, and very similar to how some societies like the UK and others in Europe in the Second World War reacted to bombs falling from the sky. It's not going to happen with climate change, and we need to accept it. But why aren't we hearing from everyone we trust that this global goal is lost? And it's simple, unfortunately. It's called stubborn optimism. It's a cultural meme. We don't like to give bad news. We don't like to trust people around bad news. We want to keep saying it's possible, it's okay, we have to hope, the story, there's always time, etc., blah, blah, blah. It's dangerous. It's costing us response time. I'm going quite quickly, so forgive me. And there are a couple of scientists who point this out. One of which is Bill Maguire, but perhaps more importantly, someone you've never heard of, Dr. Stella Nyambura from Kenya, an academic, and she points to stubborn realism as what's needed. And that is really what Scientist Rebellion and our coalition partners are all about. We have to be stubborn realists. We have to land the reality of where we are. How on earth are we going to get citizens to act and pressurize to bring the action that's needed if we aren't real with them first? So this is our message from Scientist Rebellion, and it's common sense. We want scientists to level with the public about what is lost and what is urgent. 1.5 you've heard about. Every fraction of a degree matters hides an enormous story that the public aren't hearing. Behind every fraction is an enormous amount of real world mitigation if we're going to save the Paris Agreement from failure. Well below 2 degrees. We have more time than we do certainly for 1.5, but we will need incredible changes to the way we live. And it's not good enough for scientists or an environmental leader to keep saying every fraction of a degree matters. It doesn't matter if it's true. Of course it's true, but it has no emotional resonance. It does not tell a story. It's not leveling with the public. And until we do, we're not going to take away permission from governments and polluting industries to resist decarbonising, to resist our demands, to resist what Winfried was talking to you about. Because a disinterested citizenry is permission for policymakers to resist scientists, resist you, resist protesters. It's easy. They come up with things like net zero, burn now, pay later. negative emission technologies. They're going to come on time. We've got to put a stop to this. And we can do this by bringing academia and the public into honest dialogue, which is difficult for academics. I've worked with enough of them. It's not easy. It's not what they're trained to do. It's not how they look at themselves. But this is the cultural change that we need among academics to start holding this honest dialogue, because citizens want to know. This is about their lives. It's their future. And it's also the power of academia. So how do we make sure we're not ignored? Well, you probably know the answer to this: scientist rebellion. Those of you on the call that are already members, we're in 32 countries. There are many of us. And we are students. I'm not personally a scientist, but we run from students to senior lecturers. And you'll see us in lab coats at Actions. And non-violent civil disobedience or direct action is what separates us. It's a very quick quote from Martin Luther King, who I'm sure you're very familiar with in terms of civil rights history. We have to make this a problem for people that don't want it. That's the key. Climate change is always a story nobody wants, right? But we have to make it a story that a small percentage of citizens can't resist. And that's our intention. And we intend to bring this campaign, we call it Level With Us, to the streets, to Germany, which you've heard a little bit about. And others on the call like Daniela and Nana can give you more information about Germany, but it's one of the most influential countries in Europe. It has huge influence on the world stage. Daniela's giving the thumbs. So I'll leave Daniela to sort of, give you a little bit of cultural context. And also the police aren't so up on civil disobedience tactics as they are in the UK where I'm sat. So also pragmatic. But we're going to invite the German public to demand some answers. This is going to be key in terms of the shape and the flavor of our actions, our slogans, how we message, how we talk to media. We want to invite citizens in. We're activists, even scientists activists. We don't enjoy high trust levels with the public. It's in all the polling. But what we can do is justify why we're on the streets in October, because we're trying to convey something to the public that they need to know that they don't want to know. And that's enough permission. We have a reason to be there. If we lead with our demands, it won't work. They expect that. We want an end to fossil fuels. We want to decarbonize transport. Yeah. They've heard that before. But we're there to tell them something that people that they trust aren't sharing. That's our permission. And it's simple. Unless people understand exactly where we are, how can you plan for the future? How can you demand the right things? And more importantly, as a citizen, why don't I know? So there's lots of emotion in this. And we're not alone. Another key innovation. This is massive. And it's the hardest thing. For groups to come together, I'm sure, in your daily lives, working with big teams, maybe, in coalitions out there in the real world, it's difficult. Everyone's holding tightly what they want, but we know if we act alone, we're much less likely to succeed. So it's brilliant that we're with Last Generation and Debt for Climate. I can tell you a little bit about them. Just covered that. Yeah. Last Generation, a young climate youth movement, grew out of XR, Fridays for the Future, growing very fast, been on the scene less than a year. But very, very effective. And, it's fantastic that they're joining us, in the story I'm telling you. The same thing for Debt for Climate, brilliant example of a social movement that's trying to bring global south into the global north sphere, desperately needed. And they're going to be with us in the actions, and I'm going to show you how it feeds into our demands. The actions are going to be held in Berlin and Bavaria. We will leave Daniela to say a little bit more about this afterwards if you need to know, because he's much more expert on this. There are different sort of penalties in terms of arrest and imprisonment, certainly in Munich, less so in Berlin, but we'll be visible. Germany's going to know, and that's the most important thing. And that way citizens will lean in if we get our story right. And this is our story. So with direct action and some citizen pressure, we're in new territory. So we have one demand, as you would call it, and we have two safety measures. And let me explain. So the first demand is the scientific demand. We've got to find out where we really are on the map. What's the true story? So we're going to ask the German government to admit the first global climate goal is lost. And the world's climate is going to tip into dangers of 1.5 degrees. The dangers that the IPCC spelled out in its 2018 report, when it showed the world the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees, which is massive. And there's probably people on the call that are much more qualified to sort of narrate the gradient in dangers that we're going to enter into. And there's nothing we can do about this. You know, we're going to enter this world. So that's the big win, to bring the narrative into a more accurate, truthful space, because that creates the oxygen. And with the oxygen, we can speak to debt for climate's key demand. They're already talking to the German government, and what they want the German government to do is admit the scientific demand. Where are we? 1.5 is lost. Okay, what does that mean? That means you cancel debt. It's the common sense first response. You cancel the debt of the poorest countries, because how on earth are they going to survive in a world that's coming if they're paying back rich country interest for decades and decades and decades? So this is a safety measure for the world. Get rid of the debt. Simple as that. And we're asking the German government to send a letter to the IMF spelling this out. That's all. Number 3, you've heard all about tonight from Winfried. It's a commitment to the immediate decarbonisation of the transport sector. Little word on debt. Germany is well placed. It is already, you know, publicly supportive of debt cancellation. It's a major player at the IMF. And historically, and as other German people on the call will perhaps tell you afterwards, it owes its future to a debt cancellation after the Second World War. Likewise, you've heard tonight there's popular support in Germany to decarbonise transport, and we're still working on the final kind of ask, but the establishment of a speed limit is what Last Generation are already campaigning for, so that will be included. Okay, now, most important of all of you on this call can help make it happen. We need people. We offer community. It's tough. It's really hard, right? Holding this. I hope all of you are supported, or you're in peer groups, but you know, we're a space, and we're open and very welcoming. I can say that because I've known Scientists Rebellion now for most of this year, and we want to create that look-up moment for academia, unapologetically. That's what we want to do. We want to bring the environmental movement, academia. We want to drive that wedge between government and polluting industries. We want citizens to know where the real story is. And some of us will be doing what it takes. You know, this is what Scientists Rebellion is committed to, you know, which I think most of you probably know. And many others won't be arrested and they won't be in prison, but they'll be tirelessly telling our story. And perhaps that could be you or someone who could help us in the back office. Julia was on the call. Julia runs the back office. So, you know, we need people to do all the obvious stuff to keep any social movement going. It's really hard. We're very small and we're very stretched. So any time you can offer would be greatly appreciated. And there'll be actions across our network. You know, this shows you where the groups are. You know, there'll be parallel actions, solidarity actions. You know, it's really important that we try and platform the voices of Global South academics. We're trying to do that in our outreach before the actions. So the momentum will grow. Okay, but lastly, I always like to finish with hopefully a giggle. Whatever you can do, you know, make sure the following stays a really, really bad joke.